Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this really exciting session at Amplify on releasing the potential of the experience economy. My name's Sally Evans. I'm Head of Retirement from Customer Solutions, and I have this wonderful job of listening to our customers and working with everyone across AMP to design and implement ways that we can fit into people's lives and make a difference in people's lives. This session for me is incredibly important because last year we had the opportunity to go and really do some deep ethnographic research, sit in people's homes and hear about their experiences. For those of you that were in Ruth's session earlier on about age smart cities, it was around that listening. And yes, people in New York said exactly the same as what people in Australia said. They want to be, have their lives continue. Their lives and who they are don't change because of a birthday, and they get really frustrated and saddened when people put labels on them or people define them differently to how they define themselves. So we're going to hear today from another great entrepreneur in this sector who's making a difference globally. Before I introduce Elizabeth, I'd just like to deal with a few housekeeping issues. As you've heard today, Amplify is a do fest as well as a talk fest. So please do, tweet, go on to the Amplify app, Instagram, engage and share your thoughts and insights. Elizabeth's going to speak for about 25 minutes and then there'll be time for questions. And we really do want to make this a conversation. I've had the privilege of spending the last couple of days with Elizabeth, and I'm really looking forward to today's session. What really brought Elizabeth to our attention is that she's one of the people around the world who's actually changing the paradigm of ageing, and she's amplifying the economic vitality of people who are over 50. And yes, it's an economic issue, it's a social issue, it's a human rights issue, it's a cultural issue, it's all of those things. But even bigger than that, it's an unprecedented opportunity for people of all ages. And we hear a lot about the challenges we've got. One of the things I heard in the breakfast on Wednesday morning is with the rapid implementation of artificial intelligence, we're going to have the most overwhelming unemployment in the next decade. And yet Elizabeth's going to talk to you about what she thinks is part of the solution for that. Elizabeth is recognised globally. She's got an incredibly long list of accomplishments here, but among many of the venues and opportunities she has to bring people's mindsets around senior entrepreneurship includes the White House, includes the United Nations, includes the European Union. It includes the peak decision-making bodies around the world today. And Elizabeth's voice is being heard and the impact is being realised. What particularly interested me about Elizabeth's work, coming from my investment management background, is she's actually looking at who's capitalising entrepreneurship of the future. And by bringing the experience, the intellect, the technology, and the capital to entrepreneurship, we can really make a difference around some of these mega trends that are impacting us. So I'd now like to introduce Elizabeth Isele and welcome you to Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally, for that terrific introduction, and it is wonderful to be here in Sydney. And as we talk about the global mega trends, the other aspect of my work and the work that is most passionate and I am most focused on is actually working with the individual senior entrepreneurs. And when we talk about the mega trends and supporting senior entrepreneurship, and it has to be done so senior entrepreneurs can flourish, but we must remember at heart is the individual senior entrepreneur who is making a difference in their own life, in their own economic self-reliance, and that ripple effect in terms of their family's economic reliance and their communities and their country's economic self-reliance, and the global picture is what develops into these huge megatrends. But I think I am not a top-down person like Ruth before me, and I know that I have a hard act to follow. I am a bottom-up person, and it focuses on the individual. So don't get carried away when I talk about these megatrends. The megatrends that I talk about are ways in which we can empower the individual. So I think it's key to remember that all of this is behind empowering individuals. We are at Senior Entrepreneurship Works, and Senior Entrepreneurship Works is both a noun and a verb because senior entrepreneurs work, and it also works as an economic engine, senior entrepreneurship. And we are spearheading a movement to create a new paradigm, a paradigm shift, so that the world recognizes the human capital of seniors as assets and not liabilities. And our ecosystem, and I hate that word ecosystem, but it really, we haven't thought of a better one yet in terms of capturing what's the infrastructure under a movement. And our infrastructure is the 4 pillars of empowering senior entrepreneurs, individual entrepreneurs, are advocacy and public policy, research, access to capital, and education. And as I go around the world and I talk about this issue, this comes up all the time, and it certainly comes up when I first started talking about this issue. Well, why does this matter, and who cares anyway? And of course, please, I'm not that old yet. Why do we even have to consider this? Or, of course, the entrepreneurial what in terms of a senior. And senior is a whole time bomb in itself as a word and an adjective. And as I say, in the United States, certainly when you hit the age of 50 and you receive your AARP card in the mail, it's like the sort of Damocles falling down over you, and you're just mortified of your age. And I said, we've got to change that also. Because when you think of when you're in school or when you're in high school, and in America, when you're in high school, you just aspire to be a senior. That is your ultimate goal. You want to be a senior. When you're in college, you want to be the senior class. When you get into the business world, you want to be that senior partner, that senior editor. But again, as soon as you reach age 50, it's like, no, I don't have anything to do with that word senior. You immediately distance yourself from that. But we say entrepreneuring trumps aging in our new experienced economy. And we stop talking about senior because, again, that gets into that whole chronological arc. And we don't want a chronological arc. We want an experienced arc. And that experienced arc includes the experience of the senior, be it the senior employee or the senior homemaker, the senior business person, the senior executive, and their life work experience brought together with the experience of the younger generation. And that cross-fertilization produces the catalytic effect that really turns entrepreneurship into an engine instead of just a theory. 3 out of people in the United States never ever plan to retire. And this is a choice. They may change, as you've heard many times over the week, the ways in which they work. But the most important thing seniors feel is that they want to remain connected, they want to remain productive, and most of all, they want to remain relevant. In the US, we have actually identified through research 34 million seniors are self-identified as wanting to start their own businesses. In Australia, the seniorpreneurs in this country are the fastest growing cohort in terms of entrepreneurship. It's exactly the same in the United States. They're creating businesses much faster than the 20 to 34-year-old. It's the same in Europe. It's the same in the United Kingdom. And as I travel about the world talking about this opportunity, this demographic is not a challenge, it's an opportunity. That same statistic holds true, and for many different reasons in many different economies. The most overwhelming statistic that we have is that young people now coming out of college cannot afford to take that risk. In the United States, certainly, unfortunately, they are saddled with inordinate amounts of college debt. And so when they graduate from college, they immediately need to get a job to start paying down that debt. So we are working on public policy changes in Washington so that young people working with seniors, and again, sharing that experience in the reverse mentoring, can mitigate the college debt. They will reduce the college debt if they work with a senior entrepreneur starting a business for 1 year or 2 years, depending on how long they work with a senior entrepreneur. And of course, as I said earlier at the breakfast, I don't know how many people were there at 7, but I don't blame you if you weren't, that it is, again, the young person bringing their experience and working at starting a business. This is almost like an apprenticeship. This is a gift. so that they can really test their feet in the water. Do I really want to be an entrepreneur? Do I have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? And at the same time, you're working beside this person with this incredible amount of business experience to help you through that stage. So we are hoping this is going to revitalize entrepreneurship in America, because the first time ever, the number of businesses being started is less than the number of businesses closing. And the only businesses that have a higher rate of startup is for that 50-plus-year-old. So, of course, we take a little pride in that ourselves, but I'll try to be humble. The other thing is that, and I use this quote from Australia, which is just fantastic, that there are 2 million Australians over 50-plus, 55-plus, who are unemployed, but they really don't want to be unemployed. The cost to the economy of those 55-plus being unemployed is $10.8 billion. This is not just something about keeping seniors happy and engaged and working longer. This is an economic issue. This is profoundly impacting the Australia GDP. An increase of just 7% of those 55-plus-year-olds would increase the GDP by $25 billion in 2022. And I use the picture of the kangaroo on the beach because in America we would have people, lounging on the beach in Sun City or some surf island, but I couldn't resist the kangaroo. People in their retirement careers, again, this is what we have discovered. This is worldwide. This is data backed. This is not Elizabeth sort of off the top of her head, wild and crazy thinking. People in their retirement years are 3 times more likely to be entrepreneurs than and build small businesses than young people. And this is another incredible data point that comes from the United States. And of course, senior entrepreneurs, and we encourage senior entrepreneurs to please start small businesses. And in fact, we try to take the total intimidation out of entrepreneurship, because anybody thinks of an entrepreneur has to be, creating, incredible tech firm or multi-million-dollar companies. We encourage people to start very small. So there's a huge small and micro business movement in the United States, as well as other parts of the world, in both developing and underdeveloped countries. This statistic is one of the most profound, and was the most profoundly affecting for me, is that if 1 in 3 micro enterprises in the United States hired just 1 additional employee, unemployment in the United States would be 0. Skeptic that I am, I thought that's ridiculous. I mean, that's just a huge overstatement. So I went to the people, and that's from the Association for Enterprise Opportunity in the United States. I said, show me the research, politely, of course. And so they took me back into the research, told me all the, the way in which it was created, the impact, everything. And it is absolutely 100% true. And this kind of data is what gets doors open for me on Capitol Hill, in the European Union, now in Australia, when I can demonstrate also what Ruth said earlier, that seniors are job creators. They're not just holding down jobs. They're not just becoming economically independent. They are creating jobs. And this is where the economic shift really comes. The other fact is that under the UN standard assumption that if everybody eligible to retire at age 65 did so, the GDP would fall by 1/3 within the next 10 years, and within the next 15 years, it would fall to 50%. These are staggering numbers, and they are very real numbers. So it's like, why are more people not paying attention to this opportunity? And it just, as I say to people, this is not rocket science. This is a huge demographic that can create this kind of economic building and growth. So we have got to figure out how to tap into it and how to support it. These are some of the benefits of becoming an entrepreneur at 50 plus. This is why the 50 plus entrepreneur has an overall success rate that is 50% higher than anybody else starting a business. The 50 plus year old starting a business, their business will be in business 5 years out, 50% more than any other business started today. And the advantage of it is that, believe it or not, creativity, and many of you may believe this, of some creative artists in the audience. Creativity sparks with experience. You have all this experience that acts as a catalyst. It allows you to think creatively because you've got this framework of experience to begin with that catalyzes new experience. People over 50 recognize unmet needs. And as you can tell from my willingness to say whatever I think, they're not afraid to say what needs to be done. They are less risk adverse than any other generation. And this is another one of those data points I thought, well, why is that? And many people thought, well, if you're older and starting a business, you will be more afraid of taking that step in your life. It turns out that they are not more afraid. And so we did, again, surveys into this to figure out what's at the bottom of this. And over and over again, people would say, again, going back to experience. In my lifetime, and in fact, when we were talking at Capitol Hill and I brought one of my senior employee colleagues there so I could, again, demonstrate in actuality that this is happening. And she sat before the US senators and she said, I failed so many times in my life and I know that I can pick myself up and move forward. So it's that kind of resilience that they can also build on. And that's the next point here is the resiliency. And for them, change is the norm. Change is absolutely the norm. They have lived through change and they know that there's every kind of change in the path ahead of them. And their networks, of course. They have phenomenal networks, which are broad networks and deep networks. If you're thinking of starting a business, you don't have to know everything because there's certainly somebody in your life who does know that or does specialize that. So you don't want to try to do everything. You want to tap into the networks and get that kind of expertise that only comes with experience. In other words, I say they have what it takes, people over 50. And then we talk about how you, and we always try to come away with or leave specific steps that you can do as individuals and communities to harness this economic potential. And the way to harness it first is really to energize communities to go back to those 4 pillars of support. How do you get that kind of cross-sector support? This is not something that just the financial institutions understand in terms of the economics of it. The financial institutions are also understanding that seniors starting new businesses are a new market opportunity. This enhances their portfolio because they have more loans which they can issue. So it's a business opportunity for the businesses as well. And again, we were talking this morning about universities, and universities not only having opportunities to create new research, because there's a dearth of research in this area and on the senior entrepreneur, which needs to be done so we can actually have quantitative instead of we have an enormous amount of qualitative information about this opportunity, but we really lack the quantitative information. So that's an opportunity for universities and education systems, but it's also an opportunity to create additional programming and curriculum. For the 50-plus-year-old, universities, the shrinking of the younger population is shrinking the university applicant pool. And the only bigger applicant pool at this time is the 50-plus-year-old. And they are dying to come back to the university to learn things, to learn either a general course or a very focused course. They don't have to just come back to learn about entrepreneurship. There's all kinds of ways in which they can re-engage with the university. And as Ruth was talking this morning about age-friendly cities, there's a brand new initiative starting about age-friendly universities. And I've met one in Dublin and I've met one in Phoenix, Arizona, and got them talking with one another to create a pilot that we're calling the Experience Incubator, because we want to create on a university level or on a community level, an experience incubator, which is just like a business incubator or accelerator, where we bring in a cross-generational approach of seniors, again, with their experience, and the younger experience, particularly their technology experience, so that they work together and, again, bring all these assets together to create success. So, again, it's creating space in your community, in your environment, be it a corporate environment, create space for innovation and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship does not have to be just external. If you get employees thinking entrepreneurially, one of the greatest black holes in corporate America is that 10 years out from retirement, the individuals who are thinking about, retirement become totally disengaged with their current job, their current goals, responsibilities. The statistics about engagement in work, period, are devastating. And we were discussing this at breakfast this morning also. And when you think that across the globe, the per employee engagement, real engagement in their work and their career is 13%. You think that is pathetic. Absolutely. I mean, it's pathetic it's pathetic for the individual, because imagine living your life 13% engaged in something that takes up such a huge amount of time. And of course, the impact on the employer is devastating, because they've got this employee whose mind is on everything else aside from their work. So we are encouraging employers to, even 10 years out of retirement, start creating programs so people can look at, investigate, explore options when they do retire. And what we have said, and we continual theme throughout this conference, is, for Pete's sakes, let's retire the word retirement. People are not retiring. They're certainly not exiting, which is like your final exit. We want transitions for people throughout what we're identifying as their career arc. So someone coming into the corporation, coming into AMP, will see that it's not just my entry-level position, and it's not just that I am striving for this promotion so that I can hang on to those final 30 years of vacation, as Ruth said, but it is how you can re-engage at every step of the way, how the corporation supports that kind of skills acquisition, because your job is going to change, if not weekly, daily, in terms of the information that comes in and the repositioning of your work. So the employer that catches on to that figures out how to keep that new employee engaged all the way through their transition out of the corporation. The return on investment for that company is phenomenal. These are some of the policy changes we have underway. And again, as I said before, it's education, research, access to finance, and public policy changes, because it's no one sector can do it on their own. You have to bring a room full of people together that represent the cross-sector to see how to create the infrastructure to support this new phenomena, this new economic engine. In the United States, if you've been laid off, and many 50-plus-year-olds are laid off, they cannot get their unemployment benefits unless they're applying for a job. And I said, this is absolutely absurd, because there are no jobs, and there's certainly no jobs for people, few jobs for people over 40, but if you're over 50 and if you're over 60, forget it. And I said, you're paying unemployment benefits to these people. And I said, that's charity. You're throwing your money away on these unemployment benefits. I said, if you turned that around and invested in these people, gave them whatever money they needed to first get some entrepreneurship and business startup education, so you could even tier these benefits, give them money to do that, and once they understand what it takes to start a business and they want to take that next step, let them take the rest of their unemployment benefits to use as seed money to start the business. Again, just common sense, not rocket science. Instead of paying people to look for jobs that don't exist, and those 50-plus-year-olds are filling out a form every single week saying that they applied for a job, knowing that they're not going to get that job. And it's like, talk about depressing in terms of, individuals, certainly economically. It just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So then, of course, we encourage workforce development organizations to have entrepreneurship training, not just workforce skills training. We are going for tax benefits for seniors starting new businesses. We are going for investment credit for people against their taxes. Seniors sometimes are paying a very high level of tax rate. So can they get a reduction in that if they're using their money to start a new business? We want new banking policies. And we also want federal programs to reduce the percentage rate that you pay on your loans. In America, seems like every cohort, whether it's a woman's-owned business, a veteran-owned business, a minority-owned business, everybody gets a break in their interest rate, except for the 50-plus-year-old. And I said, give them a break. So these are the kind of policy things that are working on. And as we say, 50 plus equals individual, community, and national economic self-reliance and vitality. And that senior entrepreneurs, and many of you have heard me say this before, when I did a presentation before the senators on Capitol Hill, they, of course, foolishly asked me if I had one last thing to say. And I always have one last thing to say, and they said, what can we be doing to support this? And I said, the first thing you can do, and we have, again, this is a theme throughout the week, you have got to think differently. You have got to stop this whole negative paradigm of aging. You have to change your attitude, because everywhere people are talking about this demographic bulge as gloom and doom or a silver tsunami. And I said, it's not a silver tsunami. It is a silver lining, and if you support it, every economy in the world is going to reap golden dividends. So that's what we encourage each of you to please join the movement in some capacity, and that capacity could just be raising your voice to say that I understand this is an economic opportunity, and then turn to somebody else and say, well, what else might we be doing to make this happen? And it will happen. As I spoke in the beginning, we're talking about individual senior entrepreneurs, and individuals can make a difference. The only way you cannot make a difference is if you don't say anything. But if you say something, anything, and don't be afraid to, provoke a little disruption, that's very healthy and constructive. Just be part of the movement in some capacity, and Australia will reap those golden dividends. Thank you very much.